Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to our next webinar from the Teacher Webinar Series. Thank you for being with us today. I see people are still joining, so let's just give them a few seconds and we will be starting shortly. So I see people joining from different places, from Azerbaijan, from France, from the United States. Wow, that must be quite early in the morning. Please feel free, Brazil, fantastic. Please feel free to let us know where you are connecting from. Turkey, Texas, wonderful. Okay, so I think we can officially start today's meeting. My name is Joanna Wrzesinka, and I'm the head of ELT and institutional relations at ETS Global. I'm normally based in Poland, but today I'm speaking to you from sunny Greece. And today's webinar is going to be about feedback and how to provide effective feedback in a test prep classroom. But pretty much everything that I will be talking about refers to just any classroom, because actually the framework that I'm going to discuss was not even created for specifically language classroom, but in general for effective education. But first things first, let's first see what is it that we are going to discuss today. So, of course, we will start with saying what is feedback, what's the role of feedback and in teaching and learning, and what's its importance. We will talk about ways you can provide feedback, who can be involved in it, and the role of learning objectives and success criteria in feedback. Then we will go to a bit of a theoretical part and we will discuss one of the feedback models. Of course, it's not a new phenomenon. It has been discussed by a lot of people involved in education, but specifically today I will refer to a model that was proposed by Hattie and Timperley. We will talk about some conditions for effective and useful feedback. And then we will go to the workshop activity of today. You will hopefully get involved in a little bit of work on your side as well. And we will have an activity in which I will ask you to try to adapt, to use a template that has been created based on Hattie and Timperley's feedback model, and practice providing feedback to a sample student's response that you will hear today. And then at the end, of course, we will sum up, we will talk about takeaways for today, and I will refer you to some of the publications that you may have a look if you would like to learn more about the same topic. And as usual, I guess some of you have joined us before, but if this is your first webinar, this webinar is recorded and you will be receiving the recording automatically together with the confirmation of attendance in today's webinar. And also at the end, we will have some time for question and answer. And you can, of course, comment in the chat, but for the Q&A, we will be using the Q&A option. So on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, you can see an icon of a speech bubble with a question mark. So if you have specific questions, please write them in the Q&A tab. We may not be able to answer all of the questions, but of course, we will try to answer all. And my request is to please insert questions that in general are related to the topic of today, because sometimes the questions are not really related to the discussed topic. And then, of course, they will be answered only if we have time left. In principle, we will just refer to what's the topic of today's meeting. Okay, so I guess we can start with discussing first what is feedback and what's its role in education, in language learning. So feedback is considered one of key features of successful teaching and learning. And it's probably the most important aim of formative assessment. There is some disagreement on what makes feedback truly formative, how to make sure that what we actually provide, the feedback we provide, making sure it really leads to improved learners' performance. Because just the fact that we are providing feedback may not necessarily mean that it will help in improving the performance. Then what should be included in the feedback message in order for it to be effective? Does it matter what we say? Of course it does, or it does matter how we provide it, in what form. These are all things to consider. And then how to deliver feedback correctly. So these are some of the questions that there seems to be still some disagreement, and depending on which authors you follow, you can see different recommendations. So for learners, feedback is key because it helps maintain and increase their effort to reach the goals. And it also supports them in pursuing the goals. They receive information on what they can do to improve and how to achieve their learning goals. For teachers, it helps in setting appropriate goals. It also provides information on how to support learners to maintain and to increase their efforts to reach the goals. So, of course, teacher provides feedback to learners, but also learners can provide feedback to teachers. And based on the feedback that the teacher provides to students, again, it influences further in instruction. So there are different ways of the ways feedback can be provided, and I'm sure you may have seen some publications or attended some sessions in which different methods or techniques have been covered. But in principle, we can talk about feedback that's immediate or delayed. And I remember when I was at the university, it was believed that immediate feedback is best when you want to focus on accuracy. So, for example, when you want students to master a new grammar point, you would offer them immediate feedback. So as soon as you hear there is an error, you will immediately correct it. Or delayed feedback, that in principle often the considerations or the advice is to specifically during production. So when students are writing or when they are speaking, it's generally recommended to maybe wait, so not interrupt students and then provide their feedback after they have finished. Interestingly, I was in a conference in Harrogate this April, and Penny Earl was referring to a recent research study in which actually it turned out that adult learners seem to really appreciate immediate feedback, even if it's during the production activity. So what we may think as teachers is better for students, sometimes actually students want to be corrected immediately. So it's very interesting, and you may really find conflicting sometimes recommendations. Also, when we talk about feedback, of course, it can be more or less explicit. So you can say openly about what needs to be corrected. You can imply, or you can provide guidance, or you can signal only which elements are to be corrected without saying what specifically learners can do. And I would like to start with a very quick warm-up activity. Let's imagine that the activity you gave your learners was to write a summary of a short reading passage. So basically, a writing activity. They need to write a summary of a reading passage. I would like you to think about how you would order these ways of providing feedback for this particular task from most explicit to least explicit. Okay, maybe you can use chat for that. So what would be the most explicit technique for this particular task? And I think this context of what the task is quite important. So it's a basic writing activity in an EAP setting. So the students were asked to write a summary of a short reading passage. What do you think would be? Please feel free to write the order of the letters that you think are from most explicit and least explicit, and then in a moment we will see if your suggestion is. Okay, so somebody, Fatima, thank you, you wrote D. So you believe that D, providing written explanation on strong and weak aspects of this response with examples, is the most explicit. Yes, I would definitely agree with that, because you provide, it's related to this specific response and specific task. Okay, then what would be the next? Again, if we talk about very specific task, so not in general how to write a summary, but how to write a summary for this specific passage. Okay, let me just show you my idea for this. So I would say, as we said, probably the most explicit in this case would be, again, as we already discussed. Then if we talk about specific summary for a specific passage, then I get showing example of a strong work for comparison might work. Again, if we talk about specific sample and specific passage. So we don't show a summary to a different passage, we show a successful response for that same passage. So that would be also quite explicit, because students can basically compare how more or less it should look like. Then probably providing a checklist. So have you included the main idea? Did you include all the main points? Did you make sure the grammar is correct? Or did you shorten the long sentences and so on? Then maybe referring student to the rubric, which would be a description of qualities and features of a successful response. And then number 5, again, it's my suggestion, and it's nothing is super definite. I'm sure we could have a long discussion on it. It's probably asking some probing follow-up questions, like have you included the main point and important details? Did you review? So that would be my suggestion. But again, no wrong answers. I guess it's also a good approach whenever we are looking into developing our skills and understanding. And probably, again, maybe there will be a disagreement, because it does depend on the specific task that you are given at a particular moment. Now let's look at who can be involved in providing feedback. So obviously the teacher, learner. So we want to encourage students to self-assess. For this, they need to know what to look for, basically, in order to self-assess and to understand what they are supposed to assess themselves on. And then peer assessment. And self and peer assessment need to be taught, practiced, and monitored. It's not something that students instinctively know how to do. Sometimes they think that peer assessment is about saying one good thing and like 2 good things about somebody's work and one thing to improve, which is one of the so-called sandwich technique that also has both supporters and people that don't think it's a very successful technique. But active involvement here actually depends on learners' understanding of the learning goals, learning objectives, or sometimes they are also called learning intentions, and related success criteria for a given task. So it's not only about saying something positive about somebody's work and what the person could improve, but peers need to know what specific success criteria they are supposed to look for. Okay, so we've mentioned learning objectives, learning intentions, and success criteria. So the learning objectives are descriptions of what learners should know, understand, and be able to do by the end of a learning period or unit. And success criteria are measures that are used to determine whether and how well learners have met the learning intentions. And I will show you some examples of success criteria that were set based on specific learning objectives. So intentions and criteria help track students' progress, provide feedback and assess achievement, and also reduce discrepancies between current understanding and intended learning. Because what it specifically may need, to use correct grammatical structures. What do you mean by that? Do you mean successfully use present simple sentences, affirmatory sentences, questions, and so on. So the success criteria need to be specific, easy to understand, measurable, and need to be observable through the task that you are providing the students with. Okay, so let's now pass on to the feedback model that we are going to use today during our workshop activity. So this model was established by Hattie and Helen, John Hattie and Helen Timperley in 2006. And they identified 4 levels that feedback can be provided on. And again, it's not only feedback for the purpose of learning foreign language. They have been extremely influential for general education, and their work is best known and was carried out mainly in Australia and New Zealand. But of course now they are extremely influential all around the world. So they have identified the so-called task and product level feedback. So if we provide a learner with a task, how well has the task been performed? Has the aim of the task been achieved? The so-called process level of feedback. So what strategies are needed to perform the task well? Has the student applied those strategies successfully? The so-called self-regulation level. How can a learner monitor their own learning? What work they can do on their side to make sure that in the future they can perform similar tasks better. And so self-regulation level is also related to this idea of learner agency. So learners taking ownership and responsibility for their own learning. And the so-called self level, also known as praise. So when I was a student, I used to get my homework back, and the teacher would write very good or well done, things like that, which basically didn't give me any specific information about how I did, just a vague idea. And interestingly, Hattie and Timperley have determined that the self-level feedback is not particularly helpful. Doesn't really work and does not lead to improved performance. And in the further parts of today's workshop, we're not really going to refer to this level of feedback. So feedback should address 3 key questions. Where am I going? So what is the aim? What is the goal? It should feed up. How am I going there? So this is again to provide to feedback to the learning process. And where to next? Feed forward. So what is the next step after I have completed the particular task? Now, so we are going to trying to look at this model in detail and try to understand better what specifically how those levels of feedback work. So again, the purpose is to reduce the gap between where the student is and where the student is meant to be. So on the task level, key questions is, where am I going? What are my goals? The major questions is how well has the task been performed? Is the answer correct or incorrect, for example? So sample teacher feedback on a task level could be something like this. The goal of this task was to state your opinion and explain your reasons using details and examples. You were able to express your opinion, but your reasons lacked elaboration. You may want to limit the number of reasons, but focus more on supporting them sufficiently. Then the feedback can be given also on the process level. So how am I going? What progress is being made towards the goal? So what are the strategies needed to perform the task well? Are there alternative strategies that could be used? And here a specific feedback on the process level could be something like this. You responded to the task, but instead of developing each of the arguments, you only listed your reasons and then came up with a few more ideas that were not well connected. What you could do is think which ideas can support your main arguments and make sure to explain this connection in your response. So that's process. Okay. Now let's look at self-regulation. So where to next? What activities need to be undertaken next to make better progress? What is the conditional knowledge and understanding needed to know what you are doing? And it's also about self-monitoring, directing the processes and tasks. So here what the example feedback could be is, I appreciate your readiness to come up with ideas on the spot, but this strategy was not entirely successful in the context, for example, of a speaking activity. What could you do in order not to experience this problem in the future? Then you would probably wait for students to self-reflect and offer a different idea on how to approach this task in the future, or how to prepare for such tasks in the future. And then if the test taker has no ideas or is not fully, there could be more suggestions. The teacher could also say, perhaps you could investigate different ways students can take and organize their notes before speaking and identify the way that works best for you. And again, we've mentioned the self level, something like, well done, now this time you worked harder, and things like that don't really work. It's also more personal. So we are actually here. It sounds more like we evaluate the person rather than the task, which also may not be a very good idea. Okay, so there have also been some question prompts suggested to assist you with generating feedback for each of the levels. So what kind of questions can guide you to provide feedback specifically for task? So you may ask yourself questions, well, does his or her answer meet the success criteria? Is his or her answer correct or incorrect? How can she or he elaborate on the answer? What did they do well? Where did they go wrong? What is the correct answer again? And what other information is needed to meet the criteria? So completeness and accuracy, we could say. On the process level, what is wrong and why? What strategies did he or she use? What is the explanation for the correct answer? What other questions can he or she ask about the task? What are the relationships with other parts of the task? What other information is provided? What is his or her understanding of the concepts, knowledge related to the task? And then for self-regulation, how can they monitor their own work? How can they carry out self-checking? How can they evaluate the information provided? How can they reflect on their own learning? What did they do, for example, to complete the task? What happened when they tried a specific approach? How can they account for something? What justification can be given for the way they completed the task in a specific way? What further doubts do you have regarding this task? How does this compare to, let's say, another task you have done that was maybe more successful than this one? What does all of this have in common? What learning goals have you achieved? How have your ideas changed? And so on. But is applying the model enough? So assuming we have mastered the model, we remember, okay, it has been proven to be effective to give the feedback on those 3 levels. Is it enough? If I give to each of my students this kind of feedback, would they automatically improve? Would they progress? Well, in theory, they should, but actually Roy Sadler identified 3 conditions for effective and useful feedback. First, the learner needs the feedback, because if the learner doesn't feel they need the feedback, that even if we provide it, even if we provide it, it will not pass. It will not have the effect. The learner receives the feedback and has time to use it. Sometimes we can provide the feedback, and learner can even admit that it's valid, but may not have time to actually use this feedback. So may not have an opportunity to perform a similar task and actually take advantage of the feedback. And the learner is willing and is able to use the feedback. Maybe the feedback is not clear to the learner. They don't know exactly what they are supposed to do, or basically they just don't want to use it. And I really like this quote from Brookhart that you can see on the slides that describes successful students. So it's not only on our side, it's also depends on the attitude of students. And she says, successful students are willing to have the quality of their work confirmed or challenged, knowing they have the means to meet the challenge. Conversely, the less successful students were more likely to see assessment and feedback as under their teacher's control, not their own. So again, speaking of the ownership, learner agency, taking responsibility for their own learning, that's also extremely important. Okay, so now we had a bit of a theoretical introduction, and I would like to suggest a short activity. And don't worry, it's not going to be extremely comprehensive. I will just want to encourage you to try out applying some elements of the discussed feedback model for a sample students. So our activity will be to provide feedback to a learner who is preparing to take the TOEFL IBT test speaking section. So we have, let's imagine we have either a small class or one-on-one class with somebody that prepares to take the TOEFL IBT test. And so we ask them to record their response to a sample speaking task. So the student has recorded his response and is now waiting for your written feedback. Note, we are not going to rate this response. So we are not going to say what score the response would get, how it would be rated by raters. We are supposed to give a formative, descriptive feedback to help the students improve their performance. So now this is how this would work. We will first see the learning objectives and related success criteria that had been shared with the students in advance. So it's very important that the students understand where they are going and how we are going to measure if they are successful or not. We will use a template feedback form based on the discussed feedback model. So I have no possibility to share it with you at this moment, but you will receive this template together with slides and recording in the follow-up message after this webinar. We will listen to the task and the prompt, so the task that the test taker received, and then we will listen twice to the student's recorded response to the same task. You will have also 2 minutes to draft your feedback, and don't worry, you will not need to reflect on all the 3 levels. And I will also show you the transcript, because I know it may be hard in this webinar setting to remember everything the student has said. So again, for the purpose of this workshop, you may just to choose one of the success criteria that I will show you in a moment, and only one level of feedback. So you may want to only think about task level feedback that you could provide, or only process level feedback, or self-regulatory feedback for this particular students. Okay. Okay, so our context for this activity is we have a student that's roughly B1, let's say, and the learning objectives are to first, we want the student to be able to state a position on a topic and support it, to use a variety of signal words and phrases, such as on the other hand, or for example, to use vocabulary effectively, to sustain speech at an even pace for a short time, 45 seconds, and to use stress, intonation, and pauses to express meaning effectively. So these are the learning objectives, these are the learning goals, but we will also look at specific success criteria for this task. So again, you may remember only one of those success criteria for the activity. And my colleague later, as we listen to the sample, will actually paste those for you in the chat, or since she has already done it, so that you can have those points in front of your eyes as you listen, okay? So that here they are, stated the position and provided 2 or 3 reasons with clear details or examples, organized the ideas in a logical way by using signal words and phrases, used topic-related vocabulary well to present his or her reasons, spoke for the full time with only short pauses and few hesitations, and used stress and intonation patterns effectively, so listeners' effort was not required. So I encourage you to maybe think now which of the success criteria you will be focusing on, and in the moment we will see the specific task. Okay, so I've mentioned the template. This template you will receive in the follow-up message, and of course it's something that you can feel free to use in your classrooms, and I will zoom in to show you how this template has been built. So the parts in blue, of course, are task specific. The parts in black are universal. So you first need to list specific learning objectives for the particular task, and I copied the ones that we have already discussed. And then you have 3 parts. So you have where am I going? And here you have the success criteria. There is a little bit guidance here on how to set success criteria. First of all, they have to be task specific. And it's always good to ask yourself, are they clear enough to the student? Are they specific enough? And are they observable through the task? So can we really measure with this particular task whether a student is able to meet those criteria? So you can see the first 3, there were more. So on the second part, you see that there are in total 5 success criteria that we have listed before. And then you can mark if the person mostly met this criterion, partially met, or if the person haven't met this criterion. And then we have 3 places to provide task level feedback. It's the part that's directly under the success criteria. We have a process level feedback that's on the right-hand side of the handout, in which is basically about what processes that student used, what did he or she apply, and whether that was successful or not. And then where to next, so self-regulatory feedback. What can students do extra on their own in order to improve their performance in the future for similar tasks? Okay, so this is the task, and I'm going to read it to you. State whether you agree or disagree with the following statement. Then explain your reasons using specific details in your explanation. And here is the prompt. Learning through online courses is more effective than learning in the traditional classroom setting. Okay, and now I'm going to play the test taker response twice. Please choose one of the criteria that my colleague pasted in the chat, and then think about whether you're going to look at task level feedback, so the completeness and the process, so the strategies that the test taker used, or self-regulation, how they could improve that in the future. Okay, ready? Let's give it a go.
About learning through online course is more effective than learning in the traditional classroom setting. I don't agree about that. I disagree a bit about this statement because I think that in the classroom people have the chance to make contact with the students and professors, and in this way can get more information than sometimes in online you can have this chance. Uh, in another way, I think that the possibility to have a professor there give you the possibility to know about important subject and something more about what are you study or the subject that you study.
Okay, one more time. Learning through online courses is more effective than learning in the traditional classroom setting. Do you agree or disagree? And use specific reasons, right?
About learning through online course is more effective than learning in the traditional classroom setting. I don't agree about that. I disagree a bit about this statement because I think that in the classroom people have the chance to make contact with the students and professors, and in this way can get more information than sometimes in online you can have this chance. In another way, I think that the possibility to have a professor there give you the possibility to know about important subject and something more about what are you study or the subject that you study in this.
Okay. So someone has written that you couldn't hear. Was it just Fatima or was that everyone? I guess some people are typing, so I assume that most of you heard it. So sorry, Fatima, you weren't able to hear it. And now, please feel free to type in the chat what kind of feedback you could provide, and then we will have, okay, we can have a look at whether that was task level feedback, process levels, or self-regulation. And of course, I will share with you some examples of how I could comment on that test taker. Don't worry, Fatima, there will be a recording, and I hopefully it will be audible in the recording. And I'm aware it's not an easy task, okay? And it's for some of you, maybe it's the first time you have seen this template. So of course, by no means, like I don't expect full responses, just some examples of what a teacher could say or write specifically. Okay. Anyone? Okay. So some people, some of you are commenting that it was a low level response. Again, so we are not doing the test specific rating. We are just trying to treat it as an opportunity to provide formative feedback. Okay, let me have a look. It's not very easy for me to read from the chat. It's a very small window, but I will try to do my best. Okay, so we have a Maylin, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, from Maylin provided feedback for the point that was about organizing, whether the person organized the ideas in a logical way by using signal words and phrases. I believe in the answer there was a limited use of signal words to introduce the reasons and examples. He provided the reasons, but evidence or examples was weak. Okay, finally he didn't provide a conclusion. So there were some attempts at organizing the response and at providing reasons. Yes, but it was not entirely effective. So this is more on the task level. Yes. Okay. Okay, some people are still writing. No worries, we will wait. process, did not develop well, okay. And so Renata, you wrote, so if you were to provide guidance for the student, how he could approach this task from the process level in order to be more successful in the future. So process, so kind of strategies. Okay. So okay. So we also have about the intonation from Jamali. English is an stress-timed language, not syllable-based language, and the way it sounded was robotic. Maybe it was of the device. Cohesive devices should be stressed meticulously, like in other words. Oh, sorry, now I lost it. Sequencing should be in order, as this causes most misunderstanding. This for process level. So we could say, specifically for intonation, if we talk about self-regulatory, right? You can try to practice, even if we start by just reading aloud and this kind of way of pronouncing the stressed syllables and trying to sound more fluid, or repeating after specific, that would be more to specifically improve the intonation pronunciation. That would be as some recommendations on how to approach these tasks. That would be more like self-regulatory level of feedback. Okay, so again, some task level feedback that only provided one idea to prove the point with. Okay, and Joanna provided. I think it's a very good. It was a good. It's some kind of a process level feedback that you should be first clear with his opinion, and then try to come up with 2 good reasons. Then in the middle part, give examples. Okay, so that would be more process level, so strategies of how to specifically approach it, I guess. Okay, so Maria said personal contact in the classroom is a good point. Okay, could you support this reason in a more specific way? Okay, so again, task level feedback, that there was an idea, but it was not specifically developed, and how you could, and then could you support, like in what way you could support? That would be more. Okay, I'm not sure if I'm reading, I might have missed something. I do apologize. It's a very, very small box that I keep scrolling, but I probably missed some of your ideas, but they are very good, and I really appreciate the time you took to reflect on this response. Okay, this is, let me read this, what Emily has written. So for the point, spoke the full time with only short pauses and hesitation. The speaker spoke for the whole time, but the second half of the response included prolonged verbal hesitation. I'm learning how to teach this task. Okay, so I'm not sure what the speaker should do to improve in the future. Okay. Okay, so again, here we could think about probably the reason why there was this longer hesitation is because there weren't really enough of ideas. And then we would look if the reason was just the fact that the person didn't plan well, or is it a matter of language and proficiency? Okay, that would be another thing to consider. But I also assume that if it was our specific student, we will have much more information about this particular student and the reason for his or her challenges. Oh, now I realized I promised to give you the script and I didn't. But in the end, this is the transcription of what the person said. So I do apologize. I said I will share it with you so it's easier. Okay, so let me show you some examples. Again, this is not exhaustive for all the 5 success criteria, but some examples. So on the task level, we could say something like this. You stated your opinion and provided 2 reasons. However, these 2 reasons lacked elaboration. For example, you said students in the classroom can make contact with other students and professors and get more information in this way. But you did not specify in what way this can happen and how it is different from meeting students and professors online. You also said that in the classroom, students can learn more about the subject, but it is not clear in what way this is more effective as compared to online learning. So as you can see, we actually had an opinion and we had two arguments. So the possibility to meet people in person and also learn more about the subject, but there was not enough evidence, not enough justification on how that's different in the online setting and how that's more effective. So that could be on the task level. On the process level, we could say something like this. For example, your strategy to start with an introduction in which you state your opinion and then provide reasons was good. However, repeating the prompt in the introduction has taken time you could have used to provide explanation to your choice. Try giving only one sentence of introduction in which you clearly state your opinion without repeating the entire prompt. Practice using different signal words to more clearly organize your response. First of all, second of all, and it appeared also on the chat in your suggestions. So again, here we give more specific strategies on how to approach such tasks in the future. And an example, self-regulation, feedback on self-regulation level. When you see a task, try preparing a short outline or mind map for your response with some keywords that you can use. After recording your response, use a checklist to see if your response meets all success criteria. Try recording your response again to the same task and check if this new response was more successful. Okay, so again, this was an opportunity for formative assessment. It was not an actual test, and nobody said that this student couldn't have recorded this response more than once before sharing it. Maybe that was, it was, as we saw in the introduction, it was said that it was set as homework. So the student may have done several attempts, for example. Okay, so basically, again, this is how this kind of feedback form could look like. So it's still the same feedback form. I just pasted the example comments in the form. And again, you may not be able to provide exhaustive feedback for all the 5 points, but you may be able to really provide feedback for the obvious suggestions that students could improve. And it's still much more, I would assume it's still much more effective than just saying, you know, you could do a little bit better, you can do better than that, and things like that. Or I think that's, you know, 5 out of 10, which sometimes people also do. I mean, or even if you said, I don't know, but it would be hard to you know, even if you were trained with the band level responses, like how in a test a rater would scale this response, by just giving the students a band score, it's not super formative, because in the end the student would not know how to improve. So the idea is that this kind of specific feedback provides a much more specific information on how to improve, and it's something that students can actually work on, again assuming students needs feedback, wants to accept it, and so on, and all the other conditions that we talked about. So just to sum up, it's not just the presence of or frequency of feedback that matters, but the nature and quality of it. Teachers should aim to provide feedback that's timely. So we want to provide this feedback when students need it. So if after this task the student recorded, you know, 3 different tasks, then probably for this specific one it would be already a bit too late. The student needs it at a particular time to make progress. It should be personalized, so again referring to particular student, particular task. It should be relevant for the current learning situation and exactly what the learner needs to move forward. So again, we do it bite-sized. We focus on things that can be improved, not things very general, like you should work on your grammar or something like that. We need to be more specific. And feedback given is not the same as feedback received, because as teachers, we tend to believe that what we say is received. It's not always like that, or what we have given in a written form. Errors need to be welcomed and only then reflected upon. we learn by making mistakes, and they are informative. And effective feedback involves active engagement of learners. So we can only imagine that the previous activity would make sense if students really wanted to use the feedback and made an effort to next time, consider this feedback for repeating a similar task, or even recording the response to the same task by trying to apply the feedback the teacher has provided. I promised to provide references, and if you are interested, I strongly recommend a publication by John Hattie that's called Visible Learning for Teachers, Maximizing Impact on Achievement. And you can see it within the references. There are many more, but again, don't worry, you are getting the copy of slides, so you will be able to find them. And before we go on to your questions, I just wanted to let you know, if you haven't seen that nice banner yet, that on the 26th of May, we have our half-day online event. And there are several sessions that are related to the recent TOEFL test enhancements, but also looking in general more about academic writing skills, creativity, critical thinking. We will be also talking, we'll have a very interesting panel discussion about post-COVID classroom reality and how different types of institutions went through the COVID pandemic. What are their lessons learned? You are very much invited. Please feel free to scan the code and you will get to the landing page of the event with all the important information about the topics and the speakers. We have some time for your questions. And thank you very much for your active participation. And I'm sorry if I wasn't able to read through all the comments. Maybe I need to put on my glasses next time, or connect some larger screens to really be able to display the comments in full size. So yes, the virtual seminar will also be organized on a Click Meeting platform, and my understanding is that you can access it from desktop or from mobile device. It will also be recorded, so if you cannot make it to the entire event, or you will not miss anything if you register, because we will be sharing the recording. So about webinars on the new TOEFL, actually, we will be talking about, in the virtual seminar, about the enhancements to the TOEFL IBT test, what has changed. We will be having a closer look on the new writing tasks, so this will be discussed on the 26th of May for sure. But also, I suspect that anyway, in the new academic year, after summer, we will anyway probably organize a webinar about the enhancements, about the new writing task, because we know that it's some kind of a refresher is always good, and it will be still relatively new. So even though we will talk about it in May, then I guess we will also have a separate webinar in the new academic year. Yes, so the sources I was using was Visible Learning for Teachers by John Hattie, and the reference is in the bibliography. I don't. So I had a paperback. I don't have it right now with me because again I'm broadcasting from a different location. But Hattie and Timperley, those are really big names in the feedback world. So I'm sure you will find plenty of resources, webinars, videos, if you just Google, if you search by name, and basically the keywords. So this handout that I was using was designed specifically by me for one of the workshops I did in the past, and you will get it as in the follow-up message after the webinar as a PDF that obviously you can print and use in the classroom. It's nothing complicated. So if you need it, I don't know, you prefer the landscape format, or you would just feel free to rewrite it, reorganize it in a way that would work for you, to have an online version to type in your computer. It's really just few boxes. It's nothing complicated, and I also do not claim any rights, because the framework was created by Hattie and Timperley. I was just thinking on how to visually organize this information to be able to use it in the classroom, and kind of fit within one A4 page. But please feel free to reorganize it in a way that makes sense for you. Okay, yes, we are actually planning to have in June another Teaching TOEFL IBT Skills online workshop. It's going to be at the very end of June, and I believe we have, I don't know, Senna, if you can help me out, my colleague is supporting. We have a link to an interest form. So everybody who is interested to take part in the workshop at the end of June or later can leave their contact details, and we will notify about the next workshop date. So there will be one at the end of June, but even if you cannot do it end of June, we will be notifying about the next dates. Also, I will type the email. So we have the same email, TOEFL teacher resources at etsglobal.org. So if Senna, if you cannot locate the interest form, just feel free to drop us an email, Ali, and my colleague will let you know how you can register for it. So the workshop will be done over 3 days, 2 hours each day, and it's entirely free of charge and online. It's the same workshop that we have been offering. There are no substantial changes. Of course, we mentioned the new writing task, but it's not a new workshop. So if you have participated in the past, then probably there wouldn't be anything that's super new, unless you just want to kind of refresh your knowledge. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Ali. Thank you to everyone. And again, I do apologize if I missed some of your comments. I think I need a much bigger screen in the future. Okay, so we have just 2 minutes late. I will stay online, but otherwise, thank you very, very much. And we hope to see you in our next webinar and sooner in our virtual seminar for English language teachers on the 26th of May. Thank you so much and have a great rest of the day.